All right, Rachel, welcome to the Borrow from the Best cast.
Hey, Anna.
So happy to have you. In a few sentences, would you tell us who you are and what you do?
My name's Rachel Lanham. I'm Chief Customer Officer at Voodle, which is a platform for short asynchronous video for teams at work, particularly distributed and remote teams. And I've really spent my life working with companies and helping them use digital innovation to drive transformation. And I've done that in a lot of different ways, but right now it's this big wave of short video into the workplace that we're seeing.
Yes, I love it, Rachel, because I have spent a lot of my life dealing with companies. I was in-house 19 years, on my own for 5 years, and telling companies tools are not the answer. Tools are not the answer. So I find myself at this interesting perspective of life. It's never that I thought tools weren't helpful. It's just that I knew what they were doing. They wanted to buy a tool and have that be the answer, when I know there's so much work around structure and process and people alignment that goes through that. And I'm now working on 2 apps myself. I know the power of a tool. I know
Yeah.
how convenience can create opportunity for capacity or capability building. And in a time like 2020 and 2021, where we are in this just pandemic craziness of what's going to happen when we return to work, what's that model going to be? How do we create effectiveness? I say, look, don't worry about your model. What I want you to do right now is be rethinking all of your structures, all of your programs, all of your tools to say, how do we enhance it no matter what we choose?
Yeah, and I think there's that theme that maybe came out of the presidential election, but applies to work as well, which is build back better. We're maybe a little nostalgic to the office, but it wasn't always inclusive. It was, not always perfect. And, we missed water cooler moments, or we missed these little things, but they weren't equally distributed. And maybe this next gen of hybrid work can actually be more inclusive. And that's what excites me about the tools, is, like you said, it's not, the tool isn't the answer. The answer is, what is the new way of working? And then how do the tools become the way that the work happens? Because we like to say your headquarters is now in the cloud. It's not, it's not your four walls or your address in downtown San Francisco, but rather it's the platforms that people use, and then the rules of the game, the rules of engagement, like you say, the ways of working. So interesting and fun time to be building solutions.
I know, right? Like there's some awesome things that have come out of it and some challenging and tragic things too. And I agree with that. So as we look forward though, and we really think about borrowing from the best, I'm so curious, Rachel, because what you're doing is yes, you provide a tool, but there's so much more to what we're looking at from a cultural and people perspective. And I know you deeply understand that. So what I was thinking of is lately I'm hearing a lot from leaders, right? They're worried about culture and connection, the lack of creativity, or am I going to retain my people? And at the same time, their people are feeling disconnected or burnt out or transactional. What are you seeing? Because I know you guys work with a lot of great companies, so you've got to see some ideas that we can sort of borrow from the best on. What are you seeing in ways that companies are making good strides, either for their company or for their people?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely hearing all those same things. It's like there are great benefits to this move to remote work. People are loving the flexibility, and people are maintaining their productivity. And yet there are these concerns that attrition is just going to go through the roof, because I could sit right here and work anywhere. Not just Voodle. I could work at any company and be sitting in the same little spot here. And how to really create those moments of connection. And is creativity and innovation lost? We're so used to having to get into a room and do a little brainstorm in order to be innovative. And I think what we've seen is it's almost like the flip the classroom idea, where instead of thinking about how to recreate those scenarios, it's what's the new way, and thinking about things more micro. So instead of a quarterly offsite to do that team building event, it's, what are those team building moments every day of the week, multiple times a day, where people can just feel connected and build that in this new way of working asynchronous and all of that. So just as an example, I think I've just seen it it's more about a consistent attention and very deliberate then, oh, we'll build a great office and we'll have great snacks and a ping pong table and everybody will just come together. And, it's just this investment in infrastructure. Instead, it's like very deliberate, kind of thinking about moments of connection. That would be like the big theme of, I think, from the people that I've seen have been successful. It's like, don't try to recreate. I know Darren Murph from GitLab says, don't cut and paste, the office into virtual. And that's really, if you kind of rethink, as you said, and think about it as these moments, you can be a lot more successful.
Yeah. And my challenge to companies right now, or leaders, or even individuals, because I do believe that it'll be up to the people too, right, to really push on this, is
Yeah.
that right, he said, don't copy and paste. I say, look, we were really scrappy last year, and maybe we did copy and paste, and maybe we did okay with it, right? But a lot of those habits weren't sustainable. So I want us to move from scrappy to sustainable as quickly as we can. And that's really important when we think about how we use tools, how we use the power of connection between people, is to wholeheartedly just redo what you're doing. Rethink
Yeah.
your systems, your processes, your people, your tools. What are you using? How are you using them? How do you communicate to each other? How do you get work done during the day? Because, by the way, the how of all of that is your culture. That's the outcome, is your culture. It's not what we wrote on the wall. It's not the vision and the values. It's really the outcome of those daily habits and behaviors of the way that we get done.
So just as we were saying, as you can see on the slide, people are seeing the culture suffer. They want those human connections. They actually, it's not just a nice to have, happy hour thing, but it actually drives productivity when you have that trust and that, kind of mutual knowledge with your coworkers. And of course, we all know Slack fatigue or Zoom's fatigue, and kind of burnout are certainly big issues. But we also found in our report, and of course, we're in the business of building tools, but so we asked questions about it, that there's a strong feeling among the workforce that the tools need to change to address remote work challenges. And then when we cut it down to the younger part of the workforce, it was even a bigger percent. So there's really this huge opportunity, back to your question about leaders, to really listen to these concerns and come up with the right solution in order to engage, your entire workforce, but most especially, the up and coming workforce who really influences how things get done. And the other thing that we saw was, just in terms of what are the biggest struggles right now, lack of human connection, burnout, and that Zoom fatigue again really popped up. And I don't think that's any news for anybody, but it's just another source of this insight that those human connections are really important. And we talked about leaders being worried about attrition. And retaining their employees, and that human connection is what's going to keep you there. There's that famous quote, I don't know who said it, it's like, people don't quit their job, they quit their boss. That it really is about those humans. It's not just like, the company, as a concept. So those things are really interesting to think about for leaders today, of what are people, they're looking for leaders to change their behavior and not be like, okay, vaccines here, let's get back to normal. They're looking for something different.
Yeah, they are. And listen, I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is a talent market, and talent is going to make decisions based on how we're handling this as organizations. And so I talked to a client earlier today, and they were saying, Matt, we were kind of rethinking, maybe we shouldn't have done a survey asking what our people wanted. And there's a pause, like, what? But at the same time, I get it, because they're sort of scared. What if they say something and the majority is one thing? We can't pull that off, right? But I don't think the question is, can we or can we not pull it off? The question is, how can we? How can we get to the root of what they're asking for? How can we reduce that Zoom fatigue? How can we create behaviors and processes that create deeper connections? What type of tools could we be using so that the connection is enabled, right? And my team's virtual, right? It always has been. I've been out on my own for 5 years, and I built my company, or my team, for the last almost 3. So for me, it sounds easy because we were virtual before and we're virtual now, but I've led hybrid teams too, large organizations, large organizational teams that were hybrid. And there's just a lot to think about, not only in terms of the productivity. But the other high thing on your list, Rachel, that I spotted was the distractions at home.
Yeah.
To me, I'm working with all my individual coaching clients on minimizing their distractions, turning off the pings and the alerts, moving towards what I call on-demand technology, right? Like my team, we found at first we were blowing each other's text messages up about 2 years ago, and just the everyday chatter. We use a project management software, it's great, but the everyday questions that we would ask normally, like I'd pop by somebody's desk to say like, hey, what's the, okay, we don't have that. So we were blowing each other's texts up, and we started using a tool called Boxer. Because guess what? I don't have a ping. It doesn't give me an alert. I can go into the app. I can check it when I'm ready. And we use it for voice messages and file exchanges and things like that. We just have to look for new ways. Always be asking, what could I do better or differently?
Yeah. And to your point, it's like the tools are great, but there has to be the culture and the rules of working around that. Slack, is considered asynchronous messaging, but everybody I talk to, they're actually feeling like it's pretty synchronous. Like they need to be responding to people as the message comes through, and it's a really high level of stress. And so you have to set the rules of the road where it's like, yeah, it's okay to not respond to a Slack immediately. Our synchronous time is our Zooms or, whatever it is. And so there's a combination there of not just throwing a bunch of tools out there, because it could create more stress. Versus like, oh, I'm empowered to connect on this topic at the time that I'm ready, my brain is ready to connect on it. So there's always the dark side.
So the habits are really important. My team has permission. I'd like them to check at least once a day, whatever the prime time. If it's more urgent, then I will text or call you, right? So we sort of have that agreement, but we did that through trial and error. What worked for us, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely things on the structure and the process and the people side, Rachel, that we need to do. But I know there are other tools out there that just have shortcomings, right? In terms of how they're being used. What's your view currently on that use of the tools in this time of change?
Yeah. I guess I just started to touch on that, but I think the core stack, there's the project management software, whether you're using, Monday or, Asana or whatever. And then for communications, there's email that's basically transitioned to just external communications. You've got your unified, kind of like text-based chat, whether that's Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever you use kind of on the text front. And then we have our video calls. We usually just call them Zooms, even though obviously there's lots of different platforms that you might use. And those were all very, all around, pre-pandemic, and all very useful. And I think what we've seen is as we, went to, this full remote experiment, that those tools began to be used beyond their core value. Like we are huge users of Slack, and it's very good for transactional. Here's the link. Did you get this done? Here's some info. Hey, everybody, like that transactional stuff. Like you don't need an email. You don't need a phone call. You don't need a Zoom call for that. It's very, very useful.
So it struck me that on that like string of best practices that you just shared, you quickly mentioned email, and you said email is for external use, right? Is that where you were going? So it just struck me. I don't know that my team is that advanced yet where we have like only said email is for that external use, but that's such a great differentiator, right?
Well, we found that, at least at our company, for internal, it's mainly Slack. I mean, every once in a while there, an email from HR about, the benefits that will come out and it will be internal. But the folks that really use email are myself, our CEO, the folks that are, dealing with external stakeholders and really our developers. And, they're just like, email, like, don't email me. I'll never see it, because it's, and I would say that like with Slack Connect, that's, Slack really came out to take on email. We used to, those of us old enough to remember pre-Slack, it was, our emails would rule our lives, and we'd have to go home and have 3 hours of email to do. And, Slack was kind of like, there's a better way. You can just do this messaging internally. And now they're not, 6 years later, they're kind of going after external communication as well with their new product, Slack Connect. And there are some things that it's just easier to do via Slack and have the channels and the transparency and everything that they bring. So yeah, I do kind of feel like email best practices, it's more external. the text communications is kind of for the transactional stuff. The video calls are for the human connection, and really having to get alignment. And then again, we're kind of bringing this short video asynchronous into the fabric of things, so that you can provide all that context, that your tone of voice, all those things are so important. And we found that in our research as well, that especially the younger generations, they really want that context, and they're so used to using video at home, whether it's TikTok or Instagram stories. And then they, very rich ways to communicate. And then they get to work and it's like typing and reading. It's like,
Yes.
what is this? So there's those, we've talked about this before, kind of the new expectations of the new workforce is like, they're just used to having that context, that authenticity, transparency that a video provides. But we know we can't be on video calls all day. Like it's already like, scientifically proven that your brain can't handle it.
So as we look at all those ways, right, you're sharing some best practice for me in terms of email that's got me thinking, but I think it's really just this to try to compartmentalize, right? This is what we're going to use these types of tools for. This is when we use this. This is when we use this, and then try it out just to see how that feels, right? So Rachel, I know that you work with a lot of companies and you've seen some really good use of tools. Can you give us an example of how a leader or a team might be able to leverage a tool better or differently?
The first thing is that what we've really seen, again, to this theme that you brought up about rethinking, is rethinking what a creative brainstorm might look like. We're so used to like getting, saying earlier, getting into that room and, sharing, going on the whiteboard and whatever. But in retrospect, like how inclusive was that really? You have a lot of biases that show up in a meeting setting where, the highest paid person in the room or the most extroverted person in the room might take up a lot of the air. And so we brought to the table with short async video, like putting out a prompt. Hey, what should our marketing campaign look like next quarter, or what's a new product idea, or what do you think about this competitor, and allow everybody to shoot their own personal like response to that in a stream, and then to be able to see like word clouds and AI summaries of that to say, how has everybody's voice been heard here? And in a way where I think we know like our best ideas come when we're out on a walk, or you always have great ideas in the shower. Not that you're going to take a video in the shower, but maybe once you get dressed. But this way of like just more inclusive, whether you're introverted, whether you work in India, whatever it may be, you need to, there's ways now that to unlock everybody's creative potential. And so that's, again, like one of these great rethink, we're used to team building happening once a quarter. Why can't it happen once a day? Like just thinking about different ways of doing things. And, specific to what we're building is a platform where it's just so easy to share all of that. It can integrate into other, into Slack or into the place where work may be happening, but it's a way to just get that human connection in just, in a very turnkey way, instead of something that's, feels like a lot of work, but it's just part of getting work done. Whether it's the more fun stuff like here, show us, what you're having for lunch or your pet, or it's a, something that's more around creative ideas or getting alignment.
Oh, I love that, because listen, I always say like we each have a time of day that we're best. Like I'm a morning person. I would probably, if you had this, I love this idea of this team brainstorm. I'd be recording my ideas probably at 4:45 in the morning, with a decaf cup of coffee or tea in my hand, and just sharing my feedback. And then it would be great because there's people like my husband who would probably be doing it at 1 in the morning, because that's his most creative time that he wants to sit with that. So I love that it lets us have a preference and ownership of our time, because I feel like that's lacking in a lot of companies, is the autonomy, but the true ownership of our time.
This is the mobile version, and you can also use it on the web. We certainly found when we launched, everybody was in lockdown. So it was like, I don't use my phone anymore. It's full battery at the end of the day. So it's important to be able to use web as well, but mobile's a lot more fun. And we're still, especially like the new workforce, very used to kind of the selfie cam, but you can see how there's basically streams and like, here's our pets, but also you can share, like start a prompt on a certain, creative idea or whatever it may be. And, it's just the real you. And it makes me so happy in the morning to have my coffee and watch Voodles. I'm not creative in the morning, but I love to see what's been going on and I can really do it on my own time. So I think that's kind of hopefully the new way of working. I think, again, all of our personal ways of communicating always make their way into the workplace. Twitter and Facebook became things like Slack. And so now we're TikToking and Instagram storying. This will make it into the workplace. And it's a great time to just experiment with a brainstorm or experiment with a team building activity or just building culture.
All right, peeps. Rachel and I were having such a good time that I asked if she would also bring on a client of theirs so that we could hear more about what they were doing and how they were using Voodle as a tool to engage their people and grow their culture. So here is Emma Biskupiak. She's the brand marketer for a company called Mystery.
We're a company that's always been very strongly rooted in culture. We pride ourselves in providing surprise and delight for people. That started out as like a night out on the town and has now turned into like a B2B practice. So, I mean, we have to drink our own Kool-Aid, right? Like we can't talk about bringing surprise and delight to the workplace or to couples who have been together for 40 years and are feeling kind of stagnant, and not actually invest in our own corporate culture and kind of bringing those moments into our day-to-day. What that looked like when we were in the office was what probably a lot of startups, specifically in Seattle and in tech, looked like. It was a lot of late nights where we'd order a bunch of Thai food and have beer always stocked in the mini fridge, and after work happy hours and hangouts and kind of trying the product for ourselves, and really just investing as much into each other and learning about each other's lives as we were in the products that we were building. And that's just kind of how you fuel and motivate a bunch of people who aren't quite making exactly what they need to be making, but like they really believe in what they're creating, right? Yeah. So come the pandemic, we all were working overtime, pivoting our product ourselves. So we got a lot of that kind of initially interaction face to face. And then as we kind of established what our products were, we had to peel back and do the work from home thing. And that's where we've all been going on a year now. And then luckily, Voodle came across our paths. I don't know, Seattle's a small tech community, so I'm sure it was some investor talked to somebody and whatnot, but it was introduced as in a beta, I believe, for us to try it out. And our CEO jumped on it right away. He was like, yeah, of course. First of all, it's new technology. That's fun. Also, it's a tool that you're telling me can help my company continue to feel engaged and right next door to each other, kind of. So yeah, super important to us. We've been using it for a while now. And I think the way that it's best served us is that water cooler talk, that those kind of organic, genuine interactions that you have where you learn a lot more about your peers than you ever could from an onboarding interview, or where you could from your stand-up meeting that you have every week. You get little bits of that kind of sprinkled at the beginning and the ends of your Zoom calls, but you don't really get to have those, oh my God, I almost just fell out of my chair and everyone's laughing, like those just genuine organic moments. And I feel like Voodle has given us a tool to engage with each other in that way. So we have an employee in Denver who half the team has never met in person, right? Now it's become this like ongoing joke that anytime that it snows in Denver, we get a Voodle from him where he does a series of pans around the city or wherever he is, or shoveling snow. And then there's no voiceover except at the very end, he always says, it's snowing. And it's just, it's like this weird thing, but I feel like I know him so much better because of that sense of humor that I get through that piece of content.
So Emma, I love the way you guys are using it. And in fact, this reminds me of the time that I came out of the restroom. This is when I worked in a big company. And I literally walked around the whole floor and polled everybody and asked who flushes the toilet with their foot. Because I was like, we work in a really clean,
building and I just saw somebody flush with their foot and I needed the information. And so I could totally see myself putting a Voodle together like, did this happen? Are you experiencing this? Because I couldn't believe it. It was like 60-40, the people who flushed with their foot. And I've never flushed with my foot at work. At a baseball stadium, for sure. So I know there's this fun side, Emma, to the tool, and how have you used it? Like, so, the snow and maybe like pets and things like that. What has been like the business and the performance side? Have you used it for that side too?
Yeah. So I think from a business end, it's still pretty fun. I mean, we just have a fun product, so a lot of what we do is going to feel like that. A big thing for us was around Valentine's Day. We have, that's our anniversary as a company. It's also based on our former products, our busiest day of the year. And so coming up on Valentine's Day, when there's usually a lot of this drive and preparation for that busy time of year, we didn't really have that same energy. And so we created a channel with Voodle where we encouraged everybody to kind of give Valentines is what we ended up naming it, where you gave a shout out to your coworkers and or you shared some customer feedback that you got, some love in different ways. And so not really a business tool, but business tool in the sense of like encouragement and morale and kind of feeling that sense of camaraderie. In other ways, we've also started doing the one-on-one channels. So that's been really fun. I only have one other girl who's directly on my team. And I didn't actually even know this was a thing until recently, but you can have a one-on-one channel with someone. And those moments where you just want to quickly put a thought out there without having to type it all up, or normally you'd be like, actually, can I just call you right now? It'd be way faster if I could just talk to you on the phone, and that's not always an option. Leaving a voicemail, I don't know, I get voicemail anxiety, so that's not really something that I want to do. But I feel like those moments are where our team has really tapped into kind of a B2B, or not a B2B, but like a business use case.
Yeah, I love it. And for us, I was sharing with Rachel that my team's always been remote here, right? And I've led hybrid teams, but we were blowing each other's email and text messages up. So, we started using an on-demand tool that we could go into just even for voice and text messages a few years ago. And that's been a saving grace for us to be able to not have the constant distraction or that alert that you got another voicemail or another text message, right? It's in there when you want to go check it. And, the team can make agreements. We do that once a day, we do that twice a day, or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like it integrates well with the other tools that we use too, because we're able to kind of differentiate those types of content. So if I already have a thread going on a Slack channel with Hannah about, a project that we're working on, and she hasn't quite responded to that, or there's some to-dos that still need to get followed up on. If I have this side thought that I need to throw at her, it's not kind of putting it in line, then bumping up the rest of that conversation. So that then, we've all been there. We're like, oh, actually, cool. But the point of this email was like 4 messages ago, and I need to circle back to that. So it kind of gives you a way to differentiate that type of content too.
No, I love it. I love the buckets.
I love that you discovered the kind of being able to have streams just one-on-one. And we found a lot of like your guys' way in was really the whole team and culture, but a lot of people start using the tool more on the one-on-one where it's like, I'm like sitting here. Like I had one client who was like, yeah, I was in the Starbucks, drive-through line, and I'm trying to just say something quickly to my boss. I couldn't get him on the phone. I had this typing it out, it wasn't coming out right. And he's like, I just needed to Voodle. So I got our Voodle thing going. And it was just like, it's just that message where you don't need to necessarily completely disrupt someone's day, but you really need a record of it. And that's the other thing that I would just add is the cool thing is it lives. So you can go back and be like, oh, 2 weeks ago, didn't we have some idea? And you can go back and see that within the stream. Or, one of the things I heard, Emma, from your CEO was like, when new people join the team, they can see all the culture stuff that you guys have already done and how you have Thursday vibes, lip syncing contests and all those, and like all the different things that you guys do. And it's like, oh, you can kind of feel part of the team. And we're obviously power users of the tool because we built it, but we use it for recruiting and kind of pre-boarding. And we had a couple new, like a new head of engineering start. And his first day, he's like, I'm part of this team. Like, I know this team because we've been voodling with him back and forth, and he knew I have a little dog and he has a big dog. And there's so much that we know about each other already. And it just made that first week, you know, particularly in an all remote setting, is really nervous, but he wasn't at all, because he was like, yeah, I know everybody. And it just felt really comfortable. And so there's a lot of cool different things to discover. So I was just happy to hear that Emma's discovering new ways of using the tool. So it was very flexible.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely like a proof is in the pudding kind of situation. Like, you know, you can talk all you want when you get to the point in an interview, because we've hired and onboarded people since the pandemic. We're actually hiring for a few more roles right now. And, you know, once you get to that point in the interview where you're like, all right, I'm actually selling you on the company now. Like, I'm convinced that you're who I'm going to advocate for, but like, you need to know how cool we are. There's always that hype and, you know, like, it's the best company ever. We're all like best friends. My favorite thing about working here is the people, you know, and as true as I think that is about my company, for them to be able to look at Voodle and be like, who are these people? And to be like, okay, this is cool. Like they let their guard down a little bit more. And yeah, I think that connection becomes a little more genuine. And yeah, it's the guy in Denver. We have a guy in Austin. We have a couple other people who we've hired since the pandemic who I've never met in person. And if I pass them on the street, I mean, it would be like seeing an old friend. So, and I think a huge part of that is the interactions that we're able to have through services like Voodle.
Yeah, I mean, I think my only final thought is, you know, we had the transition to forced remote, and now we're going to transition to probably hybrid, which most people are saying is, you know, the highest degree of difficulty because you have people all over the place. And my only thought is like to approach it with optimism and like an opportunity to, you know, you said rethink, and I keep repeating that, but really rethink how things are, you know, how things were done, and how this is a new opportunity to be more inclusive, more, you know, efficient, you know, more everything. I think there is that opportunity, as long as we don't just cling too much to the old ways and the old crutches that we had in the office-centric world, because it's not the future. I think everybody agrees with that, but that's different than, you know, totally changing your behavior. So we encourage, like, our tools out there for free, because we really feel like this is a time to like try new things and see what works for your culture. You heard from Emma, this works really well for their culture because they are just a naturally very innovative and, you know, a team that's very into human connection. But I think that's really the case for everybody. I think it's kind of the new mandatory, you know, employees want to feel part of something bigger and not just be, you know, punching the clock and getting the work done.
Right. And let's look at this from a diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging perspective, right? Everybody's focused on that. And yes, this is about making persons of color feel like they have a place and an impact within the organization. And we are trying to create a mutual belonging for all of us, that we are connected with all of our backgrounds, with all of our diversity of thought, with all of the interesting things that we can bring to the table. And I believe that technologies like this can really help us do that. Right. From everything when I try to message my team and I think I'm being really clear, and then I get something back like, you might want to make that a voice message. And you're like, oh, okay, I thought it was very super clear. Right. We just need to step into this world differently than we did before. And so thanks for all you're doing to help us borrow from the best and help people and culture get better.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so aligned with your mission of bringing humanity back to the workplace, and we're here for that.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Rachel.